晚安，Hello，你好，Good evening，欢迎回来，Welcome back to Wisdom Wednesday with Johnny Tiger on November 3rd, 2021. I know, Tactical Tuesday is missing, but don't worry. If everything works out, we should have a Tactical Thursday coming out tomorrow. There was a lot of things happening Tuesday and Wednesday. This is why things are kind of moved around a little bit. Uh, I really tried my best to get this daily video out there, but sometimes, what with meetings, appointments, going out with friends, and lunches and dinners and work and house cleaning and this or that, it get a bit crazy. Uh, So, anyway, I'm not going to do too much preamble. It's getting really late. I do plan to get to sleep sometime soon. Today, we're going to talk about fans. Not the electric fan, not the tower fans or heating fans. We're talking about the good old-fashioned folding fans. Um, I believe that somewhere uh, in the history of this channel, I did do an episode talking about fans, and in that episode, I talked about how, depending on what was your profession, people in Chinese history would fan themselves differently, depending on if you're a warrior, if you're a scholar. Uh, there's different ways of fanning yourself, and people were very specific about that. So today, we're going to go back and build on that and talk a little bit more about fans and the history and the usage of fans in Chinese history. But first, fan in Mandarin is 扇子, 扇子, uh, Shunje, 扇子, almost like the sun. You just want a little bit more of a sh sound to it. 扇子. That's a folding fan, fan in general. Now, I get really offended when people want to take a Chinese invention and try to that, give the credit for that to a different nation, especially when it's given to Japanese people. Why is that? Because honestly, most of Japanese culture, most of Japanese history, even their words, even their language, even the sword they are so proud of, came straight out of Chinese culture. Jiatsu massage, Japanese people call them Jiatsu massage. They're actually Chinese massage being taken over to Japan and just uh, renamed and with a slightly different set of rules. Karate, they are so proud to be Okinawan or Japan. Uh, that came straight out of a lot of the Chinese crane and tiger style kung fu. So to say that something that was invented by Chinese people is actually invented by Japanese people, it's really quite offensive. And 扇子, fan, is one of those things. If we go on the internet, if you go ask around it, if you go ask your friend, a lot you might run into some people and some sources are going to tell you Japanese people invented fans. No, they bloody well did not. And today I'm going to illustrate why is it that how can I back this up that they did not. First, let's look at some of the simple fact. Japanese people did not really become unified people. Japan wasn't really a thing. until somewhere around, well, somewhere between 3rd and 8th century. Somewhere between 3rd and 8th century. So, yeah, keep that in mind. And then as I go on, you will start to see how ridiculous it would be to say that Japanese people invented folding fan or fans or shanzi. The oldest record, and this can be verified historically, so the oldest verifiable record of a fan was over 3,000 years ago in China. The second emperor in Chinese history, the Emperor Shun, uh, when he succeeded uh, Emperor Yao. Now, back then, this is an interesting little tidbit. Uh, our idea, our understanding of uh, how an emperor becomes an emperor is usually father to son, lineage, relationship. You pass it on to your son, you pass it on to your son. But that was not the way 3,000 years ago. The first emperor was Yao, and when Yao got old and feeble, he actually did something that was very, very ahead of his time. The Emperor Yao got everybody together. We can't even say the entire kingdom because it was more like a handful of villages that listened to this guy named Yao. Uh, when the Emperor Yao called everyone together, we don't know how many people, maybe 1,000, maybe 10,000, uh, and he said, "I think I'm old. I'm too old to make decisions for you guys. So I want you guys to tell me who you want to be your next leader." Even 3,000 years ago, they were practicing a very pseudo form of democracy in China. So everyone said, well, Sean is very wise and very smart, so we vote for Sean. So Yao officially conceded the title of emperor over to Sean. So Sean became the second emperor of Chinese history. Now remember, the the Mandarin for fan is Shan Zi. What does that remind you of? It sounds like Sean. Okay? So historically, it was said that Emperor Shan's symbol of power was a five-colored fan. The five colors symbolize the five elements that Chinese people believe in: metal, earth, water, wood, and uh, fire. And metal, earth, fire, water, wood. Yeah, the five elements. And so the five-colored fan you held by Emperor Shan was not for him to fan himself when the weather got hot. That fan symbolized unity and fulfilling the five element. The five element of the five color of the fan symbolizes the completeness of his power. He ruled all five elements, and the ability for the fan to be closed means uh, everyone will be close, unified underneath Emperor Shan. That is the origin of the first historically recorded fan in Chinese history. Moving forward, uh, from that day on, all the way until the Han Dynasty, which was about 500 to 300 BC, um, the fan has been exclusively the property of the emperor. And so, all the way from 3,000 years ago to somewhere around 500 to 300 BC, the fan was exclusively the property of the emperor. It was a symbol of their power. No one else could own a fan. Gradually, when we get to the beginning of the first century, more historical records show that noblemen, especially highly decorated generals and ministers for the emperor, started to be able to own a fan of their own. Poems, articles, essays, stories from this period of time, especially around the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, which was somewhere from 19 BC to 100 BC, or 100, year 100, 19 BC to year 100, somewhere around between those times, the poems and stories start to talk about noblemen, highly decorated generals and warriors and ministers started to have fan in their hand while they're entertaining guests or pondering the solution for a very difficult problem. After the Romance, the period of the Three Kingdom, when we go into the Jin and Wei dynasty, uh, so somewhere around 150, fan again became exclusively the property of the royal household. And it wasn't until the Ming dynasty, which is about 400 years ago, 300, 400 years ago, uh, that fan trickled down to the noble people, noblemen, noble women again. And it wasn't until the Qing dynasty, the last dynasty of Chinese history, about 100, 150 years ago, 200 years ago, that the fan, the folding fan, became popularly enjoyed by commoners and civilians. So all this is to illustrate that for thousands of years, Chinese people have been using folding fan. I mean, for the most part, it was the emperor and the highly decorated people that worked for the emperor. But fan has been part of Chinese culture for a long, long time. One little interesting thing is, for most of those periods, the fan was not used as a tool for uh, fanning yourself when you get hot. No, no, no. I mean, an emperor used the fan as his uh, symbol of power, symbol of station. He can just sit there on the throne fanning himself. That's not how it worked. It would be very improper. So, what did Chinese people use fan for? Well, give me 1 second to turn the camera around and I will show you guys a few little things that people used to do with their fan that you might not have known about. Here I have a little folding fan, generously borrowed, lended to me for this video by Kitten. Nice little fan. This is definitely not something that is very traditional or classic, but it will serve for today's purpose. You see, in the old days, one of the major functions for a fan was to block dust from getting into your mouth and into your nostrils. When people were riding on horseback or in an open horse-drawn buggy, like a lot of warriors and noble people tend to do, and if you're trying to have a conversation, it's very inconvenient to have dust and grit blowing into your face the whole time. So a lot of people back then, when they were having a conversation, they would hold the fan in front of them, so they are going to sound like, well, how most people sound now when you talk behind a mask. So, yeah, thousands of years ago, uh, fans were used by noble people. as a form of mask for their face. Carrying on a conversation this way, you won't have all the dirty stuff coming into your face. Now let's talk about the more modern history. When the Communist Party took over China, one of the things they made very uh, different was they made practicing martial art strictly illegal. Martial art schools, martial art temples were burned. A lot of martial artists were forced to flee China. Those that stayed ended up receiving sentences and death penalties or just got murdered outright by the government. So, a lot of people started to go underground with their practice. This is why a lot of Chinese martial art nowadays looks so watered down because they have to make it look like they weren't doing martial art. So, of course, all the training sword and training knives, training sticks have to be thrown away because if you get caught with those things, it's pretty much like getting caught with illegal weapons. You could get death penalty for that. So Fan became a popular plaything for Chinese people, especially people who practiced uh, certain form of martial art. Back then, it's not uncommon that when you have people, two martial artists come together, or two martial art enthusiasts come together, immediately they pull out a fan from their sleeve, or they pull out a fan from their pocket, and they go like stab. What are you going to do if I do this? What are you going to do if I cut like this? And what are you going to do if I cut down from above like this? What are you going to do if I stab low toward your belly? And so the fan became a thing for training. It could simulate a training blade cutting, cutting, stabbing down, stabbing forward. It could simulate a stick. If I come at you from this angle with a stick, if I come at you from this angle with a stick, if I come from the right across, and if I come from overhead like a base, like a club, what are you going to do? Okay? So this little fan became the premium, the ultimate training tool. It's, it looked goofy now, but back then it happened all the time. You see two people, friends, that get together. They haven't even exchanged hello or greeting yet. They pull out the fan. They start duking it out on the spot, just practicing a really weird form of martial art sparring with the fan. And that's what martial artists were forced to do when the Communist Party took over China since 1949. It's a little bit better now, of course. They're not that strict about it anymore because now we're seeing a lot more martial artists coming out of China. But for a good 20, 30 years, martial artists were reduced to duking it out with each other using nothing but a folding fan. Uh, The folding fan, in historical context, also served as the main tool of trade for stage performers, most specifically for storytellers, actors, and comedians. If you are a stage performer, like if you're under the stage performance guild, everything uh, in China is guild related. So if you're a martial artist, you have a martial art guild. If you're an actor, you have actors guild. If you're a storyteller, you have storytellers guild. And every guild has their own language, their own rules, their own tradition. Some of these traditions go back really, really old, thousands of years. And today I'm going to show you guys one of the more interesting, uh, which is how the fan is used in performing art. when you are a performer, when you are a member of the Performance Guild, you always carry a fan with you. You are not allowed to use this to fan yourself, no matter how hot you get. This is not allowed. If you if you get caught doing this, you may lose your license. You may get kicked out of the union, the guild. In another word, this is just not. It's a big no-no to fan yourself with this because this is to be respected. This is a tool of your trade. This is not just a regular thing you fan yourself with. If you want to something to fan yourself with, you can use a piece of paper. You can use another fan, a secondary fan for that. But the fan you carry on stage, this cannot be used for that purpose. This fan is your pointer, it's your storytelling tool, and it helps you get your point across. And there are thousands of ways to do this. Never been trained in the storytelling or performing guild myself. I've only uh, learned a few of these, so there's a lot I don't know. But I'll show you guys because this is actually quite interesting. When you're acting or when you're telling a story and you are talking about a guy with a knife or a guy with a machete, guy with a cleaver, then you want to open the fan like a quarter of the way so it's not totally folded, it's slightly open so it's kind of wide at the other end, and you hold it sideways like this. This is a knife, this is a machete, and you go chop, chop, go chop, go chop, like that. You want to illustrate uh, an executioner chopping off someone's head, chop. Uh, Everyone gets a message. Even people who never read these rules, these specific way of holding the fan. You see this? Yeah, it conveys. It conveys the idea. Okay, it's a chopping motion with a broad instrument. Yeah. Illustrating a sword, you fold the fan up, turn it around, hold it from the loose end so the handle, the pointy end, is forward, and this is your sword or dagger. Right? It can even be a lightsaber. Okay, so this is when you're talking about uh, reenactment or talking about a sword wielding warrior. You hold it in reverse and you do your sword thing, just like that. To show a spear, you hold it in commando style. Right? You hold the loose end, the handle poke out of your pinky side, and you lift it over your shoulder like casting a spear. This is a spear. This is a spear. Hold it like this, like a pencil. This is a writing quill. This is symbolizing someone who's writing on the wall or writing on a page. Spread it open, hold it flat in front of you. This is a book or a letter you're reading. You're reading, you turn the page, read, turn the page, and then when you finish with the letter, you close the fan. Uh, it's very symbolic, very, very symbolic. Okay, bow and arrow, open the fan up, left hand hold the handle end, right hand hold the wide end like this, pull back, bow, archery, and then you let go, you close the fence. That symbolizes the arrow going out. Right? Not only that, if you need any kind of sound effect, uh, for example, knocking on door, when you're on stage, it's a big no-no to knock with your hand on the table. Okay, that is superstition. People will say that is like knocking on wood, like you just said something naughty. You're knocking on wood, right? So if you want to illustrate someone knocking on the door, you take your fan, right? Knocking on the door. Mm. So there's a lot. There's a lot of it, like uh, different ways. The ways to do like a sailboat. I believe a sailboat, you hold it by your face, with the fan open wide, like this by your face, and this is sailing motion. This is we are going onto the high sea. Like I said, there are thousands of these things, uh, and they're really interesting, very, very intuitive, like the kind of thing that even if you never read them, as soon as you see the gesture, you know what they're trying to convey. That's the beauty of these. Unfortunately, I really don't know that many, but I hope this give you guys a good idea of how interesting is that the fan could be used for all this stuff on stage, off stage. Um, Another interesting little uh, function of the fan was, of course, to keep mosquitoes and bugs away just by generating a bit of a draft. This will reduce the chance of them landing on you or coming near you. In the old days, a lot of teachers, because in the old days, bodily contact was kind of frowned upon for the most part. People didn't like to be touched. So when your teacher is trying to get your attention, let's say you fell asleep uh, in the classroom, the teacher is not going to touch you. The teacher is going to take their fan and kind of hit you on the shoulder with it just to get your attention. Uh, People who see their good friend on the street, back then again, it's not really accepted for you to go up there and pat them on the shoulder with your hand. So you would go up to them and tap them on the shoulder with your fan. And so it is also a tool to prevent bodily contact. I hope that this has been an interesting episode. I mean, I don't know how much wisdom there was in this, but uh, I personally find that the history, the culture of fan very fascinating. Before I go, for those of you that are interested in getting into fan culture and want to know, okay, so let's say I'm tired of getting these mass market fan. How do I determine the quality? What determines the quality of a fan? What determines the value of a fan on the antique market or secondary market? The most important part of a fan is the material of the bones. These are called the bones, the fingers, or the frame, these little struts that hold the fan, the material, right? These usually they're made of bamboo, uh, very common stuff, but black bamboo is a little bit more expensive, and uh, the other there are many other different kind of bamboo. There's a bamboo that has a fragrant, natural fragrance to itself. Uh, that is one of the most expensive one. So the material the bones or the fingers are made of. That is one of the big determining factor. And the second determining factor is what is on the face of the fan. Does it have a picture that is, or autograph, a signature that is from someone famous, right? It's not just going to be a nice picture. It has to be a picture painted and signed by someone famous. There have been fans that have had the autographs of emperors. That those fans would go for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Uh, so these things can go very, very expensive on the antique market. Of course, you want to be very, very careful that you're not buying something that is a fake.